online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Welcome back to the gun range, kid. You ready to get tanked? Today we're taking you to school. Tank school, that is. Now you might ask why I'm going to talk about tank operations from the cockpit of this mech, but trust me when I say I've been commanding tank crews for a long time. Tanks are typically the backbone of any army and can easily be a force multiplier for every commander. So it looks like it's my job to put you through the ringer again for old time's sake. You're gonna learn the basics: driving, ducking, dodging, and DACA. Don't worry, kid. By the time we get this done, you'll be slinging the blues and paying your dues with the best of them. Joining me on this crash course today are the combat happy Joes of Easy Company. Give them your full attention. Now let's flip on the satellite picture.
Satellite link established.
In a classic battle, tank movement works just like mech movement over open terrain. Instead of walking and running, the movement modes are cruising and flanking, but insofar as two hit numbers go, they're interchangeable. Cruising adds +1 to what's called your 2-hit modifier, and flanking adds +2, just like walking and running for a mech. You'll find this information at the top of your sheet over on the left-hand side. While I've got you here, see underneath the movement modes where it says movement type? That's because ground vehicles come in a few different flavors: tracked, wheeled, and hover. Remember, these units only move like mechs until terrain is involved, and it's often more difficult for these vehicles to navigate that terrain. But these two would be far better suited to explain that to you than I would. They're the tank experts.
Where hills and other elevated terrain are concerned, Battletechs have the ability to climb up these features 2 levels at a time. But our vehicles ain't got legs and hands like yours do, mech boy.
No matter how bad she is, this ride will only make it up 1 level at a time. But don't worry, it ain't all bad. If we're adjacent to cover of level 1 or higher and the enemy is on the other side, no line of sight exists. That sounds like a you problem, Jocko.
Some terrain is just too gnarly for smaller vehicles to push through, but other locomotion types have their own restrictions insofar as what terrain they can or can't traverse, so it's best to check if you aren't sure.
I'm stuck in this 40-ton death trap at less than 30 C-bills an hour. How do you think I'm doing?
Hetzer's gonna hetz, am I right? So the takeaway here is that combat vehicles can do almost anything a mech can do. They just take a little longer in the execution sometimes.
External camera engaged.
Remember, water is always tricky. Only naval vessels can occupy water hexes of depth 1 or more, and hovercraft, as well as VTOLs and wing and ground effect vehicles, only occupy the hex at a level above the surface.
Stop driving your tanks into the water, maggots!
Take my word for it, kids, it's an insurance nightmare.
External camera engaged.
Before I move on, keep in mind that ground vehicles receive an extra movement point regardless of mode, so long as they begin their movement on pavement and continue to travel on pavement for the duration of the entire move. However, they're also susceptible to skidding, just like mechs. So when you tell your crew to punch it, make sure the guy pulling the sticks ain't just any soda jerker. Catch my drift?
You know the saying, big guns never tire. The same is true here. Combat is combat, but vehicles can't take the same kind of punishment that pillow fort you're driving can. Some of us mugs gotta work for our pay. Sure, some of us can take a licking and keep on taking, but you blow a tread off of one of these or knock some hydraulics loose and, well, things tend to get dicey.
Each time a ground vehicle takes a hit, there's always the potential for catastrophe. Whenever one of your ground vehicles is struck by incoming fire, there's a chance that something might fall off as a result. When you check your hit location roll against the vehicle hit location table, you'll notice some of the results may trigger adverse effects like motive system damage. These effects are going to vary depending on which one gets rolled, but fortunately, the vehicle critical hit table is usually on the same record sheet along with the standard hit locations. Just pay attention to the rolls and where they land.
If your hack's got a turret on it, you can rotate it to any facing just before you fire. Only weapons in the turret can fire out of the new facing, but you can designate primary and secondary targets using weapons in your turret and those mounted elsewhere on the vehicle. Otherwise, firing isn't all that much different from what you do in a mech. Well, except for the heat.
Ground vehicles have their heat sinks built in during construction. They can fire everything on board every turn right into the ground if they wanted to and never have to worry about heat. It's the reason things like LRM carriers are so deadly. They can drop their full weapon complement on you every turn without fail and without consequence, so long as they have ammo to burn.
In the inner sphere, this is called being a nice guy.
Ground vehicles use gunnery skill just like mech jocks, but have driving skill in place of piloting skill. These two things work pretty much the same, but vehicles really only have to roll once every so often for this kind of thing. Definitely not as often as I will all the way up here in the cockpit, so it's a pros to cons kind of thing. A mech isn't the only thing that can fit inside a single hex, but only one can be there at any given time. The same, however, is not true for vehicles. Vehicles can occupy a hex up to 2 at a time, along with other types of units as well. And since we're on the subject of piggybacking, some vehicles have what's called cargo space. These can be used to carry things like infantry, equipment, or other items that need to go from one place to the other. But remember, if you have any infantry inside, they don't count for purposes of movement in the initiative order. Only once they dismount can they be active, but they can still be removed if the vehicle carrying them suffers a critical hit that destroys the cargo. Each vehicle has a designated cargo bay size, usually categorized as light, medium, or heavy, which determines the maximum weight it can carry. Trucks and utility vehicles typically have smaller cargo bays for supplies and smaller mechs, while combat vehicles will usually have a more limited storage area for spare parts and ammo. You can find the generic conventional infantry units and battle armor organization/weight table on pages 213 and 214 of Total Warfare. These tables indicate how much tonnage each type of infantry unit occupies, but we'll talk about that later. Remember, any vehicle with the space can always carry miscellaneous cargo. It doesn't have to be any one thing in particular. Alright kids, this is by no means a comprehensive guide to everything you might need to know, but with this info, you'll definitely have enough knowledge in your back pocket to get these bad boys out on the battlefield and into your forces. We've got all kinds of topics to cover in this series, but we're gonna have to call the boys down in personnel to get some additional hardware before we roll out. If you're looking for the ins and outs of combined arms warfare, you'll want to subscribe so you can catch all that info when it comes down the pike. Make sure you turn on all the notifications too, so you can find out exactly where Battlebound's gonna turn up next. Thanks to Easy Company for getting up at the butt crack of dawn, and thanks for watching. My name is Tuck Davian, and we're sure looking forward to seeing you for the next one, right here, out on the space lanes. Cargo space? No, cargo road. You motherfucker. Asshole. The road work ahead, I sure hope it does. Just remember, Shrek is love. Shrek is life.
At any rate, that about wraps this shit up.
That's on fact. I was a sign stamp delivered. Queen Rat fucking entertainment out of this bitch. Like